Hello, potential students. Here I want to talk to you about how I do my trial lessons. So, the way that I do trial lessons is maybe a little bit different than some of the other teachers that you might see. So, let me explain why I do it a specific way and what exactly we will be doing. So, first, the trial lesson can be a little bit of a dangerous moment because there's a pretty high risk of me not understanding things like what's your level, what are your goals, and what kind of materials and things do you want to work with. So, for example, I had a new student recently and I thought he was maybe the upper intermediate level. And of course, you can always tell me what level you're at, which is great, but often this doesn't happen. So I thought it was upper intermediate, and I had prepared a trial lesson for the upper intermediate level. Well, we started the lesson, and it became clear that he was probably closer to pre-intermediate or intermediate level, which is quite a bit lower. What does that mean for the trial lesson? It means that you're either you have a high risk of being exposed to material that is either too easy or too hard for you, or things that you already know, or just a huge amount of new information, all of which is bad for our first lesson together. So, I think that leads to a lot of dissatisfaction sometimes. And I also have a private teacher for Russian language, and I also find that often they give me materials that is, not in my interests or completely the wrong level. It's often the wrong level, so it's often like too easy. Loud car. So let's move on to what I do in my trial lessons. It's a lot like going to the doctor for the first time. You know that you have a problem. Now it's something with your English is not satisfactory to you. So we need to determine what that problem is and construct a plan on how to fix it. I'm not just going to throw a bunch of grammar at you that you don't really want to do. So just like at the doctor's, you're going to tell me what the problem is, and I'm basically going to make some recommendations and give you a plan to move forward. Let me be more specific. There are three main things that I do during my trial lessons. The first one is to determine your level. Now, some teachers and some schools will do this with an actual written test, but most of my students want to improve their speaking, and written tests don't always reflect your speaking ability. So usually we just talk, and it becomes pretty clear what level you should be at. This is actually pretty easy to do. So as long as you speak with me a little bit, I'll ask you a few questions. It's going to be really casual, and I just listen for things like, are you making this grammar mistake or that grammar mistake? How fast do you speak? Does it sound like the language is just not familiar to you? And it usually is pretty easy to divide into different levels of ESL, English as a second language. The next thing we want to do is determine your goals. So there are lots of different kinds of English. There's general English, there's business English, there's just for speaking, there are lessons for listening, for vocabulary, for grammar, etc. There's all these different things we can do. And it usually turns out, with everybody, that you probably have some strengths and some weaknesses. Let's take me, for example. So in Russian language, which is what I study, my speaking is pretty good. And my listening is okay too. My grammar needs some practice, especially in a few places, and my vocabulary is not that good. But I have other students with the exact opposite problem. So we need to discuss which kind of things will actually be helpful to you and which ones won't be. So if you're really good at listening, maybe you watch a lot of movies or TV shows in English, you don't really need a lot of listening practice, right? So it helps me as the teacher to not give you stuff that you don't want, right? Also, on a more maybe specific level, maybe you are a businessman and you would prefer to have business English. This is pretty common. So I worked with a lot of business students when I was working abroad. Or maybe you are interested in medicine. Maybe you're interested in law. Maybe you just need to generally get better at speaking. Maybe you have a international exam coming up, like an IELTS exam or a CAE exam, something like that. These are all pretty different in terms of materials. So if you need to practice for exam, well, I'm not going to make you watch a bunch of YouTube videos, right? That won't help you on your exam. It's definitely not the most effective study pattern. So brings me to my next point, which is the third main thing we want to do is discuss the materials. So basically I offer several different types of lessons. There are video lessons, which I honestly don't do that often. We maybe will watch a TED Talk or some kind of video, and what we want to do there is train your speaking and your listening skills. So you'll watch the video, hopefully, before the class, and then we will discuss the video. And that's all we do. And this is really great for developing your speaking skills, actually. This is good if you are maybe an upper intermediate or advanced level. If you want a more general plan that develops kind of every skill, maybe we can exclude one or two here and there. I like to work with textbooks. Now, let me explain why. So, I think it's a common mistake in ESL, especially for kind of freelance teachers, DIY teachers, that they can make materials that are better than textbooks. And this just usually isn't the case, because teaching is different than creating materials. It's a different skill. It's a different discipline entirely. And it also takes an extremely large amount of time as the teacher to make your own materials. So you're really looking at a worse experience from your teacher if they're making their own materials most of the time. Of course, there are exceptions, but there are professionals out there who are ex-teachers. Maybe they're specifically interested in how people learn, and they make textbooks, and I use these textbooks. They're great. I use them all the time. Very often my students will start off with one style of lesson, then we'll go on to a textbook, and the textbooks are just the best. But the textbooks also have some grammar. Let's say you don't want to do grammar. I have some individual PDF files. I say some. I have a lot of individual PDF files about just about anything you would want to talk about, and they're usually from the intermediate to advanced level. These are designed to develop your speaking skills, your vocabulary skills, and maybe your reading skills a little bit. There's always a reading section, but it's really about speaking and vocabulary. This is really good for a supplementary type of lesson where maybe you're already taking classes, maybe you already have English experience, but you just want to practice your speaking and maybe learn some new vocabulary at the same time, as well as have something to look at, unlike the video lessons. So these are much more easy to review, right? I like these lessons, and actually in my Russian lessons, I like this style the most, though I still think textbooks are the best. Yeah, so we'll try to talk about all of these things during the trial lesson. That is, we want to determine your level, we want to determine what your goals are, and we want to discuss the kinds of materials that you think will be the best. However, we can always switch materials if you change your mind. That's not a problem. We do that really a lot, so it's no big deal. But really, I still think the textbooks are best. Right, and then we may do a few exercises. So if you say, hey, I think I want to try the textbooks, for example, we'll open one up and look at it and do a few exercises, see if you like it. Then I will send you home. It's all online, so figuratively send you home with the textbook, and you can look at it before the next lesson and let me know what you think about it. So that's the main goals of the trial lesson. By the way, it's all free, so you don't have to pay for this. Usually takes about 30 to 45 minutes. Sort of just depends on how much time I have, how much time you have, stuff like that. The other thing I want to make a point of in the trial lessons and in this video is that you really do need to practice, and you do need to do the homework, prepare for the lessons, maybe watch some TV outside of class. You need to be working on English, not only in the classes, unless you want to study like every day for an hour or something, right? You really want to do it a lot if you want to see quick progress. Earlier we talked about how the first lesson is like a doctor's appointment. Well, I'm more like your trainer at the gym. I'm going to show you how to do these exercises. I'm going to explain everything to you. I'm going to explain